Howdy folks, Max Caveman here, bringing you to my journey to the Pokemon 2024 World Championships. Um, this is my recap for the months of November and December. Um, this was an interesting time. For all the events that I participated in during this time frame, this was the Paradox Rift format. So the first event was the weekend that Paradox Rift became legal. So um, in total, I went to 6 events, um, 1 cup, 5 challenges. Now, I did miss a couple of events in December due to being sick and not being able to attend events. So I missed a cup and a challenge. Um, and then there are obviously stores that I haven't been to, so I don't usually go to them. So let's start off with the 18th of November. So this is the weekend that Paradox Rift became legal, and it was a cup for the first event. Now, this was the hardest weekend to play Pokemon at this point, realistically, because I wasn't using the online games to test. So this, I had no experience playing any of the new matchups, any of the new tech options for certain decks and stuff. So I came in a bit blind to the event. So there were 5 rounds in this cup. Then it was top cup afterwards. So round one, I faced off against Gardevoir, and I got thrown for a loop with Screamtail. Now, I wasn't looking at all the other decks. I knew what I wanted to play, so I was looking for those cards specifically. I did not realize how dangerous Screamtail was in the Gardevoir deck. So that was a best of one. A few of these events are just straight best of ones, which sucks, but it is mainly due to time constraints. So my first time facing off against Guardy Screamtail, the Screamtail came out of nowhere, and then they just slapped a Luxurious Cape or something. I can't remember exactly which tool they attached, but basically increased its health, did a massive amount of damage to win the game with Screamtail. Round two. Oh, sorry, I did forget. For the month of November, I ran Gholdengo EX. So this was a good one. Round two, I lost against I lost against Gholdengo. Gholdengo Mirror, fairly interesting. It was basically the same things over and over again. Because it was my first time playing the deck, I was doing the heavily deep draw version with Bibarel. I knew that. I found out because of this game, that's not really the way I want to play the deck. So basically, they got the cards a bit faster than I could, and that was about it. Round three, I faced off against a Tinglu and Cloth EX deck. This was an interesting one. I did win this game, which was great, but it was sort of it was supposed to be like a ping damage to nullify attacks, and it just didn't work out for my opponent, so I honestly can't remember what the strategy should have been, but I did get a win. That was good. Round four was against Darkseid. This is the Arc Pidgeot variant. People know how this deck runs now. Just got the Darkseid out too fast, and too much consistency with the Pidgeot. Now, I was running a one of Devolution in the deck to specifically counter stuff like the Dark Side with Pidgeot. It didn't help. They had enough to just walk over the Golden Goes. So that's fine. Round 5, I got some. Now that I know how Gardevoir Screamtail works, going into round 5, faced off against Gardevoir again, and I did manage to pick up a win. So that was good. Because there are certain cards that I just thought I don't need them. I didn't have them in the deck. This match confirmed that I need tool removal, so I think I didn't have Lost Vacuum in, but I made sure I have Lost Vacuum, get rid of the item cards and target down certain Pokemon fastest to come in with the win. Ultimately, I did not make top cut. I placed 17th out of 24 Masters, so ended up basically I stayed around for a little bit for the top cut to see how things were going. I just left. There was no point in me sticking around, just playing casuals. So interesting. That was only the second cup that I've been in, so some people played different decks that they normally wouldn't just because of that, which is fine. Moving on to the next day, we had a challenge on the 19th of November. We did 5 rounds. Round 1, this was an interesting one. I believe this was a best of 3 tournament. I was facing up against Aegislash. Now, this is the Aegislash from Paradox Rift that cannot be hit by Vs and EXs, I believe. I was just trying to figure if I had a copy of the card to double check. But basically, because I was intentionally evolving and swinging in with the Golden Go, I couldn't deal damage. And I wasn't running any water energies in the deck at the time, so I couldn't use stuff like Greninja or the Lumineon to deal with the Aegislash. Ended up pushing it to game 3. The Team of Devolution worked wonders for this deck, simply being able to go back either to Doublade or Honedge, just simply extended it out. So next up, round 2, I faced off against an Arceus and Blastoise deck. Now this seems like this was a really weird deck. I found out during the game that this and my round 3 opponent basically built their decks together from the same card pool. So they had to obviously split the stuff, so they didn't have the perfect synergies in each of their respective decks. So came through the Arceus V not being able to attach to the Blastoise or the Vaporeon, just random Pokemon just sitting on the bench. Just didn't the deck just didn't seem to mesh properly, so I ended up picking up that win. Round 3 was a Charizard V and Mewtwo. So that's the Mewtwo promo you got from the 151 UPC. That's the version they had in the deck. So again, it was another one of these mashup decks that sort of had 2-3 engines in it, but they just couldn't handle it because at this point I'm starting to get very comfortable with the Golden Go deck, so I know what I'm fetching, so I end up going through it, picking up a win, so that was good. Round 4, Dark Side with Pidgeot. ends up getting a loss here. Um, well, it's Darkseid, Pidgeot, and Entei. I didn't make a note of the Entei. That did play a big role, just being able to get cards quite consistently. I remember game one, I could have potentially kept a card hidden, but I thought that revealing the fact that I had a copy of TM Devolution in the deck could have got me through the game. It didn't, sadly, so I just sort of went with it. The having the Pidgeot did help, which was having the devolution did help until they just had that extra rare candy to deal with everything. So that was my loss. Round 5, final round of the day. I faced off against Darkseid, but this was Darkseid with the Industrious Incisors Bibarel as their main draw engine, and I ended up pushing this to a tie. Very close. My opponent did really well managing their resources. I did force them to obviously de-evolve and slow them down just enough to draw out a tie, which sucked. I would have liked to have won. I could have potentially made, I could have potentially got points at this event if that last time was a win. So it was definitely one of my better showings that I have had at an event. So I was happy going in 2-1, 2-2-1, 2-1-2. I can't remember how they do the wins, loss, ties. I think it's win, loss, ties. So that's what sort of happened there. So I ended up placing 17th again, but this time out of 32 players. So definitely a bit better. Next event, the following day again. This is the same store as the Cup from the previous week, because now this is a Monday. We did 4 rounds, best of 1. And round 1, I faced off against Miraidon. I know what I need to do for the Miraidon matchup. I knew that Iron Hands was a serious threat. I can't remember if I believe I had the Basculegion in the deck by now. I can't remember if I did or not. Realizing some of the cards I need in there, I started putting in stuff like making sure I had the Lost Vacuums, Hisuian Heavy Ball, which that will come up later. So being able to just consistently get the cards I need. Miraidon, luckily it worked out okay. Just taking the 2 prizes helps dramatically instead of having to deal with a single prize matchup. So round 2, Gardevoir Screamtail rears its head again. Now I was glad I didn't have to face it at the challenge the previous day, but knowing what Gardevoir can do, I forgot that that Screamtail can attack any Pokemon. I still have been meaning to add a Manaphy to the deck to get around the Gardevoir. It has dropped off since this event, the Gardevoir decks, but it's still, I am seeing certain cards that I know Manaphy is what I need and currently in the deck. There's not really much to say here. Gardevoir has been hyper consistent ever since it came out, so it's no surprise that I did end up taking that loss. Round 3, Gardevoir Screamtail, another loss. Same thing, just Gardevoir was just too consistent. Gets its pieces before I can get everything. A good thing about the Gholdengo into Gardevoir Screamtail matchup is that certain psychic Pokemon in the deck is weak to Steel, so I was hitting weakness. It didn't matter. It was hitting the odd numbers, so like instead of having to pitch 3, I was pitching 2, which I would prefer to be pitching 1 energy for the Golden Go attack. But at this event, something happened that I was not anticipating. During because the Gardevoir Screamtail matchup, I can't remember if it was round 2 or 3, but I know it was one of them. We finished quite early, so we got deck checked. There was still 20 plus minutes on the clock. I believe we were the first table finished, so both myself and my opponent got deck checked just to make sure everything was alright, and we both failed the deck check. We both failed in different ways. My deck check failed because I had recently just put 1 Hisuian Heavy Ball into the deck, taking something out, and during the deck check, writing out the deck list, I missed the Hisuian Heavy Ball from the list. I got a warning. My opponent, and I simply had to just write Hisuian Heavy Ball on the deck list, so that was fine. Luckily, it was nothing too serious. My opponent failed their deck check because of different versions of the same card. Now, they used the Arcanine Labs deck list creator to do this, and I think they imported it from the online game. They transferred over from live, and it collated the different versions into the same one, and they had the different versions in their deck. So ultimately, they didn't realize that they had an illegal deck, technically, but it's the same card, so they also got let off with a warning. Luckily, that's all that happened. I think, given out, if it was something more serious where it was a completely wrong card, then I might have gotten that win, but who knows what actually would have happened, considering we both got warnings for this event, that game. Moving on to the final round of this tournament, I faced off against Chien-Pao with Baxcalibur. Hyper consistent deck, and this is becoming one of my interesting matchups. I know how to tackle the matchup, but in some days I can handle it, some days I can't. Ultimately, I couldn't handle it this time. I took the loss. Sadly, only 4 rounds in this event. It is a nighttime event, so we do have limited time. Ultimately, I placed 12th out of 14 players, and sadly, again, I didn't get points. With the 1-3, I was not getting points whatsoever. I think in most of the events that I've been to, you need to get at least a record of 3-1 or a 3-0-1. So 3 wins, you need at least 3 wins, and then having a tie is the best way to get into top cut for points. Now, final event for November was another challenge. So, round 1, Gardevoir Screamtail. Big surprise. It was fine. It's nothing too special at this point. I've known what it can do. I'm sure most of the people that are watching this video have seen the Gardevoir Screamtail list, and they know what's going on with it. So it was fine. Nothing too difficult about it. Round 2, I ended up picking up a win here. Now, this was an interesting list. This was a Darksard with Arceus V and then Victini EX. Now, this player, I don't want to say they're not focused for the game. I feel like they more play because they're someone they know plays, and they play to help them out. Um, I think that's the best way to describe it. But I end up picking up the Dark Side win. They forgot to use Infernal Rain to get the energies, completely mistimed it. Tried to use Arceus to get energy for the Dark Side and the Victini, but obviously Arceus can only attach to Vs, so that messed it up. So ultimately, they didn't realize which cards attached to where, so end up picking up that win. Round 3, Gardevoir Screamtail, and this was another loss. At this point, I'm simply like, I know how to do the Gardevoir matchup, and I know it can change in an instant, and that's exactly what happened. Just, I'm about to win. I got 2 prize cards. They have 1. So sorry, I have 1. They have basically next turn. I declare an attack, take my prize, and then regardless, on either of our next turns, one of us was going to win, and it was them. So, sadly, that's how it usually goes. Round 4, Dark Side. I only made the comments it was Dark Side, so I can't remember exactly which variant it was, but I ended up pushing this one to a tie. Definitely one of the better matchups, being able to hold out for so long in that 50-minute rounds. I was glad. I think this was the first time in a while that I faced off against this opponent. So it was all right. But obviously, Darkseid does its thing. I come in and try and do stuff. Sadly, most of the time it doesn't work, so just force the tie. It was only 4 rounds for this event. I believe it tried to do 7 rounds of best of 1, but we had to quickly change that because that was going to be insane. I ended up placing 9th out of 13 players, so I think one person, a couple of people dropped. I think my round 2 opponent did. They're basically Poke Parents. That's the term that most people use. They're parents that support their kids playing Pokemon by learning so they can have games against them. So I had a couple of the Poke Parents drop. It's fine. And it did place me a little bit higher, but I knew I wasn't doing well. So that's it for November. Now December, let's start with that. Big thing is I switched decks here. This might have been the worst decision I could have made. I chose to start playing a Miraidon list. My Miraidon list specifically runs Zeraora, V, and V-Star. So that's what I was dealing with. Round 1, I was facing off against Gardevoir Screamtail, and I did lose this. It is how it is. I know what comes up. Sorry about the little cut there. Just had to quickly pause because someone was coming in. So, facing off against Gardevoir Screamtail, obviously I know the matchup now. It's the same thing. Bit different because of the different deck, obviously. The reason I decided to play Miraidon with Zeraora is its V-Star attack that does 60 damage 4 times. You basically pick 4 of your opponent's Pokemon. You can select the same Pokemon twice, and then you do 60 damage to each target. So, sadly, there was a lot of 70 HP Pokemon that had to be targeted twice, and it was a bit hard. Now, this is a Zeraora V-Star with Iron Hands in there, so I've got 2 4 energy attackers in the list, which really sucked. So I lost that game. Um, so it is what it is. Round two, I had a bye, and I was really disappointed. And um, so I just basically walked around, talked to a couple of people. The store has great singles, so I ended up buying a bunch of Pokemon singles and just waited the time out. Um, then when we finally started round three, I was facing off against Gardevoir, but I was facing off against a Gardevoir list that has Unknown V in it. Now, I would later find out that this opponent um, isn't the best player, doesn't have the best reputation, so some of the things that he did weren't the best, like takebacks and stuff like that. At premier events, you shouldn't be allowed to take cards back. It is kind of more acceptable in a more casual setting, but for this event, he shouldn't really have been doing that. Um, Ultimately, I knew I was going to lose. Just set his board up too much so that I couldn't handle it. Um, and even going into a Ampy very much to take the two prizes, or Zeraora V-Star to take all the prizes, like knock out all the small guys, it wasn't going to happen. So ultimately, it didn't really work out. Final round, round four, I faced off against a Chien-Pao with Baxcalibur, and I dead drawed like crazy. I got my basic, and that was about it. Like, just nothing. It really sucks. Um, I faced off against the opponent a few times, but not like overly. So it was a bit of an interesting matchup because we just sat there and it's just like, great, this is not going my way in the slightest, and we knew that it was such a one-sided beatdown that we just kind of like accepted it. I did try. I think I got game two back, and then game three just it was still this drawn out. I believe we both dead drawed in in game three, so we really went close to the end, and then it was just like, no, we can't do this. No one's like, I can't win. It's your game here. So ultimately, I had a 0 win, 3 loss with a bye in there. I didn't get last. I do believe someone did drop, um, like the November event. I believe it was just one of those pokey parents that just like they went 0-2, 0-3, and then just like, yeah, I'm not going to play the rest of the event out, and then dropped. So I placed 12th, so I came second last out of 13. It is what it is. Definitely a bad matchup, not knowing, because I had just changed my Miraidon, so I didn't know exactly what I was doing for it. Next event is where I missed. So I did miss the two events that I mentioned at the start of the video. Was sick for the two events, missed a cup and a challenge. Ultimately came back on the 18th of December, and this was the final event of the year. So a lot of the events were pushed forward in the month because of the holiday season. And I feel like a few players were trying to get that one last win to potentially get points for the year. So I started off with round one. Rapid Strike Urshifu with Inteleon. And I was playing Miraidon, so I had weakness for this matchup, and I just got walked over quite handily. Every chance I got to start building something up, the Urshifu just hit weakness and knocked it out. So I was not having a good time with that matchup. So that was a handily lost that. Round two. This was an interesting one. I was facing off against a Meowscarada EX deck. I believe there was a few interesting matchups that people were wanting to play for this event. Very interesting because obviously the Meowscarada, it's supposed to be a ping damage style deck where you just do all these small bits of damage, and then I believe the idea is to fully upkeep them, and then they just take a whole bunch of damage on a lot of things at once. Sadly, they could not get what they needed, so I ended up walking away with that win. Round three, Fusion Strike. Enough said, I got that loss. They handily walked over me. Too hyper consistent. There's a reason why it's been one of the best decks since it came out. Yeah, I was I was not thrilled to face Fusion Strike, but obviously I know what I need to do. I couldn't do what I needed to do. They walked over me. Now this was an interesting one. Round four, I faced off against an Armarouge EX. So all fire toolbox style deck. I had no idea what this deck was doing. I was completely going blind. It's my first time playing against it, so I was trying to work out which Pokemon that I should be attacking into. I actually found this it quite interesting. Ultimately, I lost because my opponents managed to get a couple of Armarouges out and then just go, here's all the energy, and then I take a big knockout. Because they would hold in cards back and just like, cool, I don't know what this does. And yeah, I love facing that deck. That was fantastic. If I face it again, I probably would do better. Who knows? But just the fact that I faced off against a really interesting deck was quite good. And the final match for the night was against Gardevoir Screamtail. Oh boy, am I sick of saying that deck. It was very close. It did come down to, oh, here's the Screamtail, here's a bunch of damage on it, and here's a knockout. Simple enough. Ultimately, this was probably one of the best events that I've been to, facing off against 5 completely unique decks. Just, that's what I kind of want to play Pokemon for, is the complete variety. And out of these 6 events that I have listed off today, majority of them are Gardevoir decks. I'm just trying to see here. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 games with Gardevoir, 8 of which were Gardevoir Screamtail. So that's a big swing towards one deck. And then even Darkside, I got 1, 3, 4. Wait. 1, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 Darkside games. So a lot, you can tell what sort of decks people want to be playing. I realized the Miraidon deck wasn't that good. Oh, and for the 18th of December, the last event, I placed 17th out of 19. So 17 is my go-to spot, I guess, for these bigger tournaments. But ultimately, for the months of November and December, I walked away with 0 CP. And that is really disappointing. During this time frame, a lot of the players are starting to hit the best finish limits. I know at least I think there's 2 or 3 players that need to finish either first or second in order to get points, and they are making the top cut, taking the fourth place, third or fourth place, and then so people that don't have points are struggling to get it because these people will just sort of taking the spot and not getting any points for it. Now, I don't want them to just stop playing. That's not what I'm saying. It's just a bit difficult if some of these players are just taking up that slot. Because obviously, in the end, only a select few people can realistically make it. Um, Especially in my area where there's still only 4 stores running. Um, Now, these 6 events were taking place over 3 locations. Um, so I have been traveling a little bit for events, but mostly I try and stick to these 3 events. The 4th location is maybe a rare one off now, but it is how it goes. Ultimately, this is just my journey. Um, Hopefully, I do have some fun matchups coming up. I am trying to find my deck still that I want to play, and at the time of recording, we're about to get Paldean Fates released shortly. So we will get a few more cards, not too much, but a lot of the players are now starting to look towards the regional levels because of the best finish limits and the fact that we need at least a high place in regional to get to Worlds. Hopefully, I can attend a lot more events in the near future, but we'll see how it goes. Now, I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown of my events. Well, little, it's been going for a while now. Hopefully, you enjoyed. Hopefully, I get to see you again next time. But until then, have a good one, folks.